Both of the DC villains for Marvel Heroes and Marvel villains for DC Heroes videos were received quite well, and I've decided to do it again, but of course it is going to be DC villains for X-Men characters. Of course, I probably could have inserted some sort of X-Men character in the Marvel version of the video. However, I feel the X-Men is so large, they have so many characters and so many popular ones at that, I might as well just give them their own separate video. We are going to look at 10 X-Men characters. So the first X-Men we're going to start with here, which is probably the most popular X-Men of all time, is of course Wolverine. And the two DC villains I decided to give him is Deathstroke and Vandal Savage. Both of these characters could test very particular limits that Wolverine might have. Deathstroke is of course one of the most deadliest mercenaries in the DC universe. He has taken down, or at the very least fought up against, some of the most deadliest characters, good or bad, in DC. He has a multitude of weapons at his advantage: guns, swords, all types of gadgets. He's super intelligent. He is a master at strategy on the battlefield. He has all he needs to go up against Wolverine, especially the fact that he does have a healing factor. However, it's nowhere near what Wolverine is capable of doing. Maybe you would need to write Deathstroke in a way where his healing factor is somewhat up to par with Wolverine's. I don't think Deathstroke is going to be getting his arm chopped off and he's going to be able to regrow it, although Deathstroke shouldn't even be putting himself in that type of situation in the first place. Taking down a man with an adamantium skeleton with 3 claws that protrude from his knuckles and a healing factor such as Logan's, this is a challenge that Deathstroke would not turn down. For Vandal Savage, I also believe this is a character that you could write in a way has a close relationship with Logan, stretching back hundreds of years. The age difference is of course very different. Logan is maybe at tops, let's just say 200 to 300 years old, whereas Vandal Savage has been around for 30,000 years, if not maybe more. He is immortal. Maybe they traveled together for some time. Maybe Logan trained with Vandal in his early years. Maybe they were part of certain militaries together. There is so much story you could do with these two characters, but over time it would simply just go down a more sour route. Wolverine would probably discover Vandal is a little unhinged. Maybe their ideas and mindsets are nowhere near alike with one another. Vandal is all about power and control, and that is not what Wolverine has any interest in, and he starts to see the very villainous side of Vandal. You would obviously do things where Wolverine has killed Vandal many times over in the past, and he keeps coming back to life, and it is a situation where every time he comes back to life, he learns a new skill or possibly even a new ability to ensure that if he has to go up against Wolverine, he wants to go up against Wolverine, he's not going to be so easily taken down the way he was before. And before we head to the next character, I just want to point out about Vandal Savage. I do think he could be a fantastic villain for the X-Men as a whole. Next up is Cyclops, and the two villains I gave him is Mirror Master and Mr. Freeze. Now, in all fairness, I don't have any personalized connections with these villains to Scott in any way. Cyclops in a way is dealing with a form of a teleporter in a sense. I could only imagine things that Mirror Master would do whenever he tries to zap him with his heat ray. He pops up one portal, then pops up another one behind him, and the heat ray just strikes Cyclops in the back. I think Cyclops could definitely have a tougher time with a character who moves like an escape artist in Mirror Master. And I just think to myself that if Mirror Master could deal with a speedster in the Flash, he could probably deal with Cyclops no problem. As for Mr. Freeze, I would just like to see Mr. Freeze's freeze guns go up against Cyclops's optic rays. Now, whereas I do believe Cyclops's power output would completely outrank Mr. Freeze's guns or any type of gadget, it would be very interesting from a perspective perspective of Mr. Freeze, who now needs to find different ways to defeat Cyclops, who has much more of a powerful output source. For Professor X, I decided to go with two telepathy characters in Gorilla Grodd and Despero. This one's a little interesting because one is a full-blown animal and the other is an alien. Charles Xavier has one of the most unique minds in the entire world, if not potentially the entire Marvel universe. Gorilla Grodd has done some crazy things in DC. I don't think he would be able to really amount to the things that Charles has done, but more than anything, it would be very fascinating for Charles to be able to discover an animal that can pretty much more or less do what he can do. Charles would try to approach this being with mercy and understanding, maybe even a little bit of pity. The fact that he would probably want to try and help Gorilla Grodd, that of course will not work out the way he wants it to. Now I could only imagine Gorilla Grodd would have this fantasy of wanting to dominate the minds of all mutants. As for Despero, Charles Xavier could easily go up against any mutant or human who has the capabilities of him, but why not give him exactly that, but in a super powerful alien? This right here is another character who could be a full-on X-Men villain, not prioritizing Charles Xavier. Despero is a character in which Xavier unfortunately has never truly been able to get rid of. He's always been a thorn in his side, but Xavier also knows him really well and knows how dangerous he could truly be. For Jean Grey, I also managed to give her two characters who have the ability of telepathy in Dr. Psycho and Brainwave. These are two people more on the side of who I believe would maybe be a little jealous of Jean Grey's powers and abilities. Dr. Psycho would have a true hatred for Jean Grey, not just because of the power she holds, but also the fact that he despises women. And what would only grow his hatred for her over time is the fact that she would always be thwarting him. He would never be able to beat her, not even once, which always makes him go back on the attack against her, thinking that finally this will be the time he'll be able to do it. What you could do with Brainwave, however, if you somewhat change his origin, he is a mutant of the DC world. He was born with his telepathic abilities. When he was younger, he has a history of being taken under Charles's wing to learn how to harness his abilities at full capacity and for good, if you will. Throughout time together, Charles maybe learns that Brainwave is a little too unhinged, and no matter how much he tries to train the boy, Brainwave himself is not willing to change from his more evil antics. Many years later, when he's much more grown up, he discovers that there is a new telepath who is almost like a right-hand woman to Charles, who was trained the way Charles wanted her to be, Jean Grey. And now he has a form of hatred for her, just like Dr. Psycho. But whereas Dr. Psycho is just all women, Brainwave has a jealousy type of a hatred, in the sense that he thinks that should be him. Next up is Beast, and for him it is Ultra Humanite and Killer Croc. One is much more of an in-depth battle and the other one is just simply brawling, so we might as well get that one out of the way. Beast versus Killer Croc, I think, would simply be the brawl. Now it all depends on which Killer Croc are you taking. Are you taking more of an Arkham Knight Killer Croc, or maybe the Arkhamverse in general? Are you taking maybe Killer Croc from Batman the Animated Series, or how he has looked in various different comic book iterations? This could be a fight that Beast would easily take, or it could be a fight in which Killer Croc would devour Beast and probably eat him for lunch. Now, since I believe Beast's bodily proportions is more in tune with a gorilla, yes, you do technically have a gorilla versus a gorilla, but more importantly, I think you almost have a battle of sciences. Now, the dangerous thing about Ultra Humanite is he also has telepathy. If you do look outside of the telepathy factor, I think you're gonna have technically two doctors who are trying to outsmart one another. But then when they get into a fight with each other, it's going to be almost on equal playing ground. They're going to be around the same size as each other. They're going to fight very similarly. They'll both have very similar strength to each other. It is going to be about who is smarter. I do, however, believe that both of these characters would have respect for one another. Next up is Storm, and for her, I landed on Poison Ivy and Livewire. With Livewire, it is the idea of how much electricity she is going to be able to produce to deliver against Storm. However, with Livewire, there have been many instances where her power output has been insanely powerful, and if she could potentially outshock Storm, it would be interesting to see what Storm would do with her other abilities to take down Livewire. With Poison Ivy, I thought it would be really neat to have two natural forces go up against each other. And I think what it would be here is who could outdo the other, whose powers and abilities will be able to be sustainable for a longer amount of time. And I can't say I've ever seen a situation where a bunch of giant Venus flytrap trees and branches are going up against a whirlwind storm of lightning and snow and blizzards. So this would be quite an interesting battle that would unfold. Next up is Iceman, and I gave him two different villains for very different situations. I've recently discovered he has pretty much become an almost higher than Omega level mutant, so that was really interesting to find out. With that being said, I gave him one villain that is more of a regular Iceman that I know of, and another villain that is that powerhouse Iceman. So respectively, that is Firefly and Professor Zoom. For Firefly, I really don't see how in the endgame he would end up beating Iceman in any way. I think Iceman, even as a base level character, is a far more superior character. However, Firefly does have the ability to fly and has all of his highly powered fire gadgets, which I think would be very interesting to go up against Iceman, and how he would deal with the fact that he is a pyromaniac as well, that he is simply just going around trying to burn anything and anyone he can because he simply just loves it. For Professor Zoom, I decided to give him one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe because I would like to see how his crazy powerful ice capabilities would now keep up with someone who can travel interdimensionally across all universes, literally faster, 10 times faster than the blink of an eye. I think the characteristics of this battle would be completely insane that I'm not even going to try and attempt to describe what the battle would look like. It is literally something that I feel like I would only be able to draw out, and I'm not a good artist, so I'm not going to attempt that. Now for Rogue, I gave her Parasite and Solomon Grundy. These are two characters that I really wanted to test how much power she could really induce herself with and what it would do to her opponent. For Parasite, since he would be the closest thing DC has to a rogue, this would be very fascinating. The more they hold on to each other, the more one tries to siphon from another. What type of permanent damage does it do to the other character? And in the first place, what type of power would they even be draining from each other? But draining is the key word here. Who would get drained first? And I do think we got to look at it in this sense where Rogue has control of her emotions and her powers in a sense, whereas Parasite is more of a force-fed monster. He's hungry and he needs to feed. That's how he eats. If Rogue could control that from him, I think she would come out on top easily. I do know that if Rogue ingests powers at a high level from somebody else, she also inhibits their personality. That could be detrimental. This would be really interesting. And then for Solomon Grundy, I am taking it from that viewpoint. The longer she holds on to someone and tries to siphon some of their powers, would she turn into a zombie like Solomon Grundy? And even more than that, no matter how much abilities she siphons from him, Would he ever fall? Would he ever stop? He is a zombie, so would he not just keep going? Whether or not you want her to be the victor of these two outcomes, or if you would even want her to lose, both sides of the equation have a very captivating story you could tell. Next up is Nightcrawler, and for him, I went with Hunter Zolomon and Deacon Blackfire. Hunter Zolomon does not have super speed per se. He has more so a control of time. Now, I don't know what Nightcrawler would be able to do to win this. I don't know even if he could. I think Hunter is too powerful for the character. I don't think Nightcrawler can teleport at that speed. And I also think that his distances of teleporting can only go so far. It would still be interesting to see how Nightcrawler would handle a member of the Flash family's rogues. Just a little fun fact for you, Nightcrawler was once supposed to be a DC character, and if he was a DC character, maybe he would know how to deal with a character like this. And then for Deacon Blackfire, which might be a very surprising pick for some characters, the main reason I went with him is because of the character's religious background and beliefs, and basically everything the character does is about his religious cult. Him and his zealots would be a huge problem for Nightcrawler, especially with the fact that Nightcrawler is religious. Taking down a religious cult in the heart of Gotham City, I think Nightcrawler has found his true home in DC. Alright, and then last for this video, but certainly not the least of X-Men characters, we are going with Colossus here, and the two villains I selected for him are Bane and Blockbuster. I know Colossus is a fan favorite X-Men character by a lot of people, and Bane is a fan favorite Batman villain. Both of these characters are going to be delivering a lot of strength to one another. However, Colossus has dealt with beings that are more powerful than him, and even if he doesn't win it, he has still shown what he's capable of. I think this is going to have to be a Bane that is hopped up on so much venom, it's almost as if Colossus is going up against a DC's version of the Hulk. And instead of resorting to all bronze, he will have to use some brains in this battle to figure out how to remove the venom from Bane's body. If he's got tubes, he's got to sever them. If he's got some sort of venom pack on his back, he's got to remove it. Whatever it is, that's the way to beat him. And then for Blockbuster, who is a Nightwing villain, there's many artwork of him that looks like he could be the size of Colossus, but then there's other artwork where he is huge, almost bigger than the Hulk, but he is extremely stupid. So Colossus would be able to exploit that for his character. When you have someone at the size of Blockbuster, you might need to wear him down a little bit. There it is, DC villains that I think would be perfect, or at the very least, very interesting to see against X-Men characters. So it is now your turn. Let me know what you guys think of some of these characters and who you think would actually be good fits for DC villains against certain X-Men heroes. There is a lot of mutants I could have chose here, so maybe I will have to make a part 2. But that is all I have for you on this one, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until the next time, I will talk to you all very soon.